Hi guys, I'm Ivory, and today I'm going to be doing a 2-day wear test on the Elf Camo CC Cream. I'm going to be showing you how this applies initially as well as checking in throughout the day to show you how it wears. Currently, I would say I have normal to oily skin, but if anyone has been here for a while, you know for most of my life I've had just oily skin, so most of my wear tests are catered towards people with similar skin types. In addition to that, I also have acne-prone skin. I know, I'm very blessed. If you find this review helpful, I encourage you to watch a playlist of all the other foundations I've done a review on. I will link it up here in the cards. Also, I don't want to talk because I can hear my dog growling. She's gonna bark soon. Okay, I think we're good. See? I'll also be adding timestamps in my description box, so that way you can skip to whatever part you need to. All right, so this is what the foundation will look like. It looks like a squeezy tube, but it's a pump. Right now, from what I understand, it's only sold on elfcosmetics.com. It's not sold at drugstores or Ulta or anything, so that would be the only place that you can buy it if you were interested in this foundation. But right now, Elf has free shipping on all purchases. Like, you could just buy this foundation and check out, and you won't have to pay for shipping, which I think is really awesome. So I'm gonna go ahead and prep my skin first because I feel like I never show it. I'm not gonna show it every time because I do the same things every time. So in the morning, my only skincare really is Curology, the cleanser, and then I'll use a moisturizer after. The moisturizer I use really depends on what my skin needs and also the season. So sometimes I use the Curology moisturizer. Sometimes I use one by Murad. I think it's like Hydra Boost or something like that. And that's what I do even if I have no makeup on every single day. But if I am gonna wear makeup after my moisturizer has completely absorbed into my skin, I'll next go in with the Fourth Ray Rainfall. Fourth Ray, I believe, is a sister company of ColourPop. And I really like this because first of all, it smells like cucumber water. The consistency feels like, you know, when you open up an aloe plant and it's kind of like gooey and sticky, that's what it will feel like initially. So I really like it because it makes my face sticky, so everything adheres to it better. So I just squeeze and then I kind of just let it drip and put it all over the face. And as you put it in, you can feel it getting stickier and stickier. And it doesn't stay. Like, if I don't wear makeup and I put this on, after a couple minutes, the stickiness will go away. I try to act fast when it is sticky so that everything adheres to it. Okay, and then once that is on my face, I'm gonna go next in with primer. I'm only doing half my face with primer so that way I can see if it actually makes a difference in this case. I'm gonna use the Dermablend Poresaver Matte Makeup Primer. I think a lot of you were anticipating that I was gonna use the L'Oreal Matte Lock. I actually went ahead and decluttered it because this kind of does the exact same thing and this is cruelty free. And I'm gonna apply this to the areas that I get the oiliest and then spread it outwards. But I'm not too concerned about the outside because I usually don't have an issue with my foundation lasting there. All right, so now that the skin is prepped, we can go ahead and apply the foundation. I'm gonna apply one pump and see where that takes us. So on this side, I'm gonna use a sponge. I'm using the Juno & Co. Microfiber sponge. You guys know I love these sponges. I have them in all different types of colors. They are my favorite to use, and I have stockpiled enough to last me for at least the next 2 years, I think. Because each one, if I wash them correctly and take care of them, they last about almost a year, which isn't really sanitary, but it looks clean, so that's all that matters, right? You don't have to answer that. And the shade that I'm using is Minium 330W. It's a little more yellow than I would like, but as far as the shade, I'm okay with it. I don't think I'd go a little bit darker or lighter. I think like shade-wise, this is okay. The undertone is just a little bit too yellow for me. All right, so this is one layer and I have a little bit left. I don't think I'm gonna have enough, so I'm gonna go in with another pump. And then on this side, I'm using a brush. This one is the Sigma Round Kabuki, the F82. I should have that memorized by now. The foundation is supposed to be natural looking, but with full coverage. It is a multitasking dream cream infused with collagen, peptides, niacinamide, known to plump, hydrate, and smooth the appearance of your skin while protecting with SPF 30. The CC cream comes in 20 different shades. It contains 1.05 ounces and retails for $14. All right, so this is one layer of the foundation. Definitely the sponge side is the way to go if you actually want full coverage, because I can still see things peeking through, and even like right here in the middle, I can tell there's a big difference in terms of coverage. This side is just a little bit more sheared out. They said that this was a natural finish. Okay, we can go with that. It's not a natural finish, if that makes any sense. I do want to go in with a second layer because this isn't completely full coverage to me. I would say this is medium-ish, medium full. So we're gonna go in with one more layer. On the sponge side, I really only want to go into certain areas like my cheeks, because that's where most of my acne resides, as well as my chin. I don't add a second layer just for the sake of adding a second layer if it doesn't really need it. However, the brush side, I am gonna go through everything just because the coverage is not the same, so we have to make them the same. One thing that really bothered me though when I was shade matching on the Elf website, so like I said, I picked the shade Medium 330. There was no person, like a model wearing the foundation to determine whether or not that person was my skin tone. But depending on what shade you picked, sometimes there was a model. The next shade over, which was like 350W, there was a model there, and thankfully there was, because I could tell from just looking at her that she was too dark for me to pick that color. But I didn't know if I should go one shade down, two shades down, and there was no model for those shades. So I kind of had to guess, and you guys know how I am with foundation shopping on the internet. So I kind of got lucky here, but it did bother me that some foundation shades had a model so that they could reference to, and some didn't, and mine didn't. So that is a gripe that I wanted to comment on. Okay, so this is the second layer. I did have some residual, not a lot. At this stage, I would say it's pretty full. Anyone that has hyperpigmentation or just severe acne knows that sometimes full coverage doesn't really mean full coverage, because we can still see our acne peeking through. Whereas people with super clear skin, medium coverage will look full on them because their skin's already perfect. I mean, lucky sons of bitches. The parts of my face that are clear, I would say are full, and the parts that have acne right here on my chin, it's like medium full. I'm gonna get up close in a second, but I will say that on my upper lip, I have just a little bit of dryness happening, and it's not clinging to it very well. It's quite weird actually. It's kind of bunching already. I don't know if you're gonna be able to see. I'll show it again when I go in natural lighting, but it's clinging onto my skin weird here, and same thing on this other side. And I actually don't really like the way the foundation looks on the brush side. On my forehead, there are areas of patchiness on my forehead already, and it just looks kind of streaky, but I'm not getting that on the sponge side. I'm gonna go ahead and fast forward the rest of my face. All of the products that I use are in my description box, in case you were wondering. Okay, so my makeup's all done, and I'm sort of starting to see issues already. For one, my forehead wrinkle, like it's already creasing in there. A lot of the times I've noticed that when my oils start to come through, it makes this crease go away. So that might happen in a couple hours. My T-zone just does not look that great though. It looks kind of splotchy. And the same thing on my nose, mainly on the brush side. It just doesn't look as nice as the sponge side. But that is it for now. I will check in around the halfway point and show you how it's looking. So, all right, so it is the 4-hour mark, so a little before the halfway point. I am intending to wear this foundation for 10 hours today, but because in the winter the sun sets a lot sooner, I wanted to make sure I got the natural light portion when the sun was actually up high instead of catching only a couple minutes of sunlight. I did predict that the forehead wrinkle would go away as my oils came through, and it did, so there's that. This is the side with primer, and I kind of don't like it. On the side of my nose right here, it's super oily, and I can see my skin already starting to peek through, and that's not happening so much on this side. I have a zit right here that's scabbing, and I really want to pick it. Like every fiber in my body wants to just scratch that off right now. I actually feel like I look oilier with primer, so I'm not going to use that primer tomorrow. At the beginning I said that the foundation was clinging onto my upper lip kind of weird, and it's still sort of happening, as well as on my chin. The best way I can describe it is, say you have an elastic band and it's completely relaxed and you just paint over it, and then when the paint dries and you stretch that elastic band, the paint that has dried is going to start cracking the more you stretch the band. That is the best way I can describe how the foundation is looking on my skin, at least in the mouth area. The chin especially is where I have the most acne right now, and it just it looks cakey. On my cheeks though, usually I don't have an issue, and this is no exception. It looks fine. It's just that this side is a little bit oilier than this side. My T-zone also has that same issue as my chin, like the elastic band analogy. It just doesn't look right. As far as oiliness overall though, for 4 hours, I feel like this is actually pretty nice. I would say especially this side. This side is a little less shiny, and the amount of shine that is coming through is quite nice. But that is it for now. I will check in at the 10-hour mark to give you my final thoughts for day one. All right, it is the 10-hour mark. There are things I really don't like about both of the sides. The most noticeable thing is right here at my nose. My concealer, the one I use all the time, I use the Flower Beauty one, and I've used this on and off throughout the year, so I know how it performs, and it looks weird here. I'll get up close in a second, but it is real cakey, which has never happened before. My chin looks horrifying, and so does my T-zone. So when I compare the primer side versus the non-primer side, I prefer no primer, at least not the one that I used for today's wear test. So tomorrow I'm not going to put on primer just because I feel like I'm less shiny on the no primer side, but also the foundation looks better overall without the primer underneath. And then when we get up close, the texture on my skin is just so bad. It is really breaking up. Basically, the center of my face is just there's so much wear and tear. On my nose, it's really broken up. You can see the foundation. It's like caking into the crevice of my nose. But as far as oils, overall, it actually isn't that bad. I'm a little bit shiny, but it's not terrible, but the wear of it is not great. So I'm gonna move on to blotting. I'm gonna do half my face so we can see a side-by-side comparison. I will link the blotting sheets that I recommend in my description box below. Lots of foundation picked up on my blotting sheets, and I can see on my nose it's completely rubbed off. So blotting will remove your foundation. This whole area looks like garbage. So I would say with this foundation, blotting sheets are a no-go. I am going to try for the first time blotting with setting powder instead. This is another method that a lot of people use to touch up their makeup. Instead of using blotting sheets, they'll just use powder. And I've done this a couple times too, but not often. Usually I just use blotting sheets. But what I will do is I will take the sponge that I used earlier today. I will kind of just use that to soak up any of the excess oil, and then with some loose powder, I'm just gonna very lightly, not a lot of product, just re-mattify some areas that are a little bit too shiny and see how that goes. Okay, so that's better, but not by a lot. I think if I had done this earlier on, maybe before the foundation deteriorated, I could have salvaged this a little bit more, but that's a good thing to know. But as far as like waiting till 10 hours and then touching it up, it doesn't look that great. Even on this side with the sponge, it's still rubbed off a little bit. But let's do a recap of today. So primer versus no primer, just don't do primer. And then the sponge gives way more coverage, so I'll do that tomorrow. And I'm also gonna apply way less foundation. No 2 layers, just the 1 layer, and whatever coverage that is, that's what it's gonna be for that day. Just because typically when you wear less foundation, there's just less product to cake up and bunch up on you. And overall, my impressions are it's not that great. That is it for day 1. Hopefully, fingers crossed, tomorrow will be a better day. I've had foundations where I hated it. Like I hated it this much like I do right now on day 1. And then with all the little tweaks that I do on day 2, miracles happen. It still has a shot to redeem itself, but that is it for day 1. See you tomorrow. All right, so it's day 2. My face is prepped, and instead of using the same moisturizer I used yesterday, I went in with my Curology one since I probably use this the most often out of all my moisturizers. So that's been on my face for at least 10 minutes, so it feels completely absorbed into my skin. And I'm not going to be adding the serum just because I want to add as few products to eliminate any potential factors that are decreasing the wear time of the foundation. But I am going to put powder underneath my face today. I'm going to use the Dermablend loose setting powder. I'm going to take my puff, and I'm only putting this on my chin as well as my nose and my forehead because those areas did not look good yesterday and they got the oiliest. So I want to kind of help those areas so that hopefully by the end of the day, everything looks equally oily. It's not like some areas look shinier than others. This will help balance the oiliness out, hopefully. All right, and then I'm gonna go in with foundation. I'm gonna do 2 pumps, and I'm just gonna use my microfiber sponge for the whole face. All right, so there's a little bit left, but I'm not gonna apply anymore because I'm pretty good with the coverage. I did use most of it, so I would say that I used mostly 2 pumps. We're gonna leave it here and we're gonna move on to concealer. So yesterday I used the Flower Concealer, which I use all the time, and it did not mix well. It didn't lay on top very nicely. I don't know how to describe it. It was kind of like, you know, like when you make your bed and there's an animal under the bed and you just see like little lumps under the blanket. That's the best way I can describe it. It just looked uneven, like parts of it were lumpy and it wasn't laying right on certain parts of my under eye. I'm gonna go ahead and change this up as well. I'm gonna use the ColourPop No Filter Concealer. This one isn't as bright as I would like, but I just wanna try something else. I feel like I'm doing a lot to sacrifice to make this foundation work, which is kind of annoying me, but I really want this foundation to work because it checks off a lot of things that I like. It has decent coverage, natural finish, affordable, cruelty-free, SPF. So I'm really doing the most to get this to work because I really want it to, because it's like the cheaper version, I think, of the It Cosmetics CC Cream, which, by the way, this is the CC cream that I was just talking about. I am planning on doing a wear test comparing the two, so that video is going to come after this one, so just be on the lookout for that wear test. Okay, so that really seemed to have done the trick because my under eye, everything looks good. Quickly set it with the same powder, the Dermablend one that I used under my foundation. And I'm only setting the areas that have concealer, which with the exception of the under eye are also the areas that I get the oiliest, so it'll help keep me shine free longer. And then the rest of my face I don't set because I do use powder products, so part of my face does get set and just a very few areas of my face that are not set. Nothing really ever happens to them, so they don't need to be set. So the only areas that really aren't set are that space between right under my bronzer and then my jaw, and then the space between where I set my concealer and my bronzer, like a very thin strip. All right, I went ahead and did the rest of my makeup off camera because you saw me do it yesterday, and all of the products that I use, they're the same ones as I did on day one. So I excluded it because I didn't want it to be repetitive. I think the only exception is after I set my under eyes, I did go in with the Charlotte Tilbury Flawless Finish, just because this does brighten my under eyes a little bit. The concealer I used, usually I use this to spot conceal my blemishes because it is quite similar to my actual foundation shade, whereas the Flower Beauty one, you can see, is a lot lighter. So if I use this concealer, I don't have to brighten up really, but that is the only thing I changed. I'm gonna wear this for another 10 hours. I'm gonna check in around the halfway point. See you then. All right, we have reached the halfway point, which is 5 hours. This day is going so much better. There are still some areas that are less than perfect, but in comparison to the first day, we have made great progress. I don't feel like I'm shiny at all. I feel like, because yesterday I did the 4-hour mark and I was already really greasy around my nose, and I feel like I was a little bit shinier. I mean, I wasn't super greasy at that point, but I feel like I was greasier than I am right now at the 5-hour mark. So powder seems to have remedied that issue. Overall, I feel like I look pretty good, but like I said, there are some areas that are not that great, and we're gonna zoom in and let you see why. So on my nose, I am starting to see that a little bit of oil is forming, and I'm losing just a tiny bit of coverage around the nostrils. So it's already starting to break up. The upper lip, it's still not great. I mean, because this area, I do shave it. I do get a little bit of peach fuzz, but it's still quite splotchy. And I'm still getting that same issue on my chin that I got on day one. Not as severely, but it's still happening. The same thing is also happening with the T-zone. It's a little bit better than yesterday, but it's just like a milder form of the problems that I was having on day one. Still not sitting super nicely there, but it is better. I predict that things are still gonna break down the same way. It's just gonna be at a slower rate. And even though I'm perfectly fine with the oils right now, I am gonna go ahead and blot. This is a trick that I have recently learned that I wanted to try today. I don't know if any of you watch Nakia Joy, but one of her tips was that she blots before she gets super oily, just so that your oils don't have time to really contact the foundation to break it up, essentially beating it to the punch. I wanna try and do that very lightly. I'm just gonna blot all the areas that I know are going to break up. So we'll see if this in the long term actually helps. But that is it for this check-in. I will see you at the 10-hour mark to give you my final thoughts on this foundation. All right, so I almost made it to 10 hours. It's like 9.5, so forgive me. But I just don't want to wear this foundation anymore. And I already know how I feel about the foundation. I don't need to figure it out anymore. No, guys. Granted, it does look a lot better today. It's not breaking up as much, but it's still breaking up. This whole mouth region does not like this foundation. The only areas that it looks pretty good in is my cheeks and my forehead, but my T-zone, my nose, upper lip, chin. And I think it's very clear from today that I really tried my best with this foundation. I never buy a foundation hoping that it sucks because I'm spending my own money. I buy the foundations that I'm interested in, that I think will work well for me. So when this type of thing happens, it's devastating because now I gotta return it and I have to actually leave my house to go to the post office, which means I have to probably wear pants, and it's just the whole thing. But it's broken up on my upper lip. It looks very unflattering. It's creased on my smile lines. It's super oily in my nostrils. And remember, at the 5-hour mark, I did blot there. I can hear my dogs coming downstairs. What do you think of my foundation? Aw, thanks. All right, so even though we already know how I feel about the foundation, let's go over the pros and the cons. The pros, it's decent coverage, and there's lots of good things in the foundation, like the collagen, peptides, SPF, all things that I really love hearing. And I love when my foundation is infused with skincare. That's it. That's the only good thing, because for me, I feel like I had to do a lot to make it work, and this is the best that I've gotten it to look, and I still don't really like the way it looks. I think people are gonna think that it's not that I think people are gonna think it doesn't look that bad. In terms of oiliness, it actually doesn't look too bad, but just the areas where it is breaking up, it's breaking up a lot. It didn't do well with touch-ups because it lifts off the foundation quite a bit. And even when I tried to touch up using just the powder, it was better, not great. I wouldn't touch up with this foundation. At the 10-hour mark, if it works for you, I would just take it off because it didn't do too well with touch-ups. Also, so most of my acne is on my chin, and when my foundation went over it, it just emphasized my acne. Like, it made it look worse than it actually is. I'm not saying that foundation has to smooth it out and make it look perfect, but I've had foundations that don't emphasize the texture and don't bunch up and get all splotchy and weird when it's covering acne, and just this one did not do well with texture. It's almost as if you already have to have perfect skin as a prerequisite to have this foundation work for you. And obviously we know I don't have that. So I did not like this foundation. It didn't work well for me. If you are interested in a product like this, I would stick to the It Cosmetics CC Cream. I have the matte version. I don't have the original, so I can't tell you if that works. I am still planning on doing a wear test just to show you how it's done right. This is like the original, the GOAT, and this is like the annoying sister that copies the big sister because she's cool and the little sister wants to be cool too, but it just is not the same. But that is it for this review. I hope that you enjoyed, and if you did, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and feel free to comment down below what foundation I should try next. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in my next one. Bye!